I vividly remember the day I married Tessa Langford, standing there in my rented tuxedo, feeling like the luckiest guy alive. She looked gorgeous in her white dress, smiling at me like I was her whole world. Yet, as soon as we stepped into her family's orbit, I sensed something was off. Her mother, Judith, greeted me with this tight-lipped smile, the kind you give to someone who's overstayed their welcome. It wasn't warm. It wasn't authentic. It was a mask, a carefully crafted expression to keep things polite, but I could feel her eyes weighing me up, like I was some cheap counterfeit she wished Tessa had left on the store shelf. Then there was Grant, her brother, reclining in the corner with a beer in his hand, laughing at me like he knew something I didn't. Miles used to love these family events, he'd remark, slipping Tessa's ex-husband's name into conversations at every chance he got. It was a tiny stab, a reminder that I didn't measure up. Tessa would just shrug it off, sliding her fingers along my arm. "They're just old school," she'd say, her voice light and playful. "Don't take it personally." But how could I not? Every time we visited her family, it was the same. Judith with her faux politeness, Grant with his smug comments, and Tessa acting like it was all some big joke. I'd sit at their lavish meals, pushing food around my plate, trying to make small talk while they shared stories about Miles, like he was some golden ghost they just couldn't let go of. Miles knew how to operate the boat, Grant would say, beaming at me as if I'd never touched a lake in my life. Miles always brought the best wine, Judith would add, her tone cutting enough to shatter glass. I'd nod, fake a smile. But inside, my gut twisted. I wasn't stupid. To them, I was a downgrade, a man who didn't belong in their polished, perfect world. I'd grown up in a tiny house with a dad who fixed cars and a mom who pulled extra shifts at a cafe. The Langfords? They had estates, assets, a family name they treated like royalty. Tessa was the only reason I kept showing up. She'd grip my hand under the table, whisper something ridiculous in my ear, and for a moment I'd think maybe I was overreacting. She loved me, didn't she? That's what I told myself. Every time I caught Judith staring at me like I was dirt on her shoe. Every time Grant chuckled at some inside joke about Miles. But the truth was creeping in, slow and steady, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I wasn't just an outsider, I was a mistake, and the worst part? I was starting to wonder if they were right. I'd lie awake at night next to Tessa, listening to her soft, steady breathing, wondering how long I could keep pretending I belonged in her life. Her family didn't want me here, and no amount of her. Laughter could cover that up. Thanksgiving then came Thanksgiving. And I wasn't exactly jumping for joy when Tessa asked me to join her at Judith's estate for dinner. I wanted to stay home. A cold pizza and a beer sounded far better than another night of veiled insults. But then she gave me those pleading eyes, and I caved. "It's tradition, Brandon," she cooed, all sweet and convincing. So there I was, pushing my too-tight sweater down, trailing behind her in the bitter November cold. The estate smelled like money, old money, and I felt every pair of eyes on me as we stepped inside. Judith met us at the door, her smile as stiff as ever, and led us into the dining room. And that's when my heart dropped. The table was laid out like something from a magazine. Crystal glasses, folded napkins. But it wasn't the elegance that caught my eye. It was the name card, sitting right there among all the carefully placed names in Judith's tidy cursive, Miles my stomach. Twisted. Tessa's ex-husband still had a seat at the table, like he'd never left. I stood there, throat tight, staring at it. Judith followed my gaze and with that sickly sweet smile murmured, "We like to honor tradition." I turned to Tessa, expecting her to say something, anything, to make this less humiliating. But she just smirked, a cold, knowing twist of her lips. "Mom thinks you should sign now," she said, her tone casual, like she was asking me to pass the salt. Then she slid an envelope onto my plate. My hands shook as I opened it. Divorce papers, already signed, in that same loopy cursive she used for everything. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room felt too big and too small at the same time. The noise of her family faded into a dull hum. I looked around. Grant smirking like he'd won a bet. Judith sipping her wine like nothing was wrong. And Tessa just watching, waiting to see what I'd do. It wasn't just a dinner, it was a setup. They had planned this, all of them. To push me out the door with a turkey leg in my hand, my chest ached with embarrassment. But I choked it down. I wanted to flip the table, yell, ask Tessa how she could do this after everything we'd been through, but I didn't. I just sat there, feeling like the dumbest man alive for believing I could ever fit into their world. The food smelled amazing. Roast turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, but it might as well have been cardboard. Judith was talking about some old Thanksgiving story, Miles. And the hunting trip, she said. Grant chuckled, jumping in with his own comment. They were acting like I wasn't even there, like I had already signed the papers and disappeared. Tessa lifted her wine glass, her fingers brushing mine for a second, and I pulled away. That touch used to mean something, but now it felt like a lie. I kept my eyes on that name card. Miles. How? Long had they been planning this? Had Tessa been laughing at me behind my back the whole time? I clenched my jaw. But I didn't let them see me break. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. If tradition matters so much, I said, keeping my voice steady, let's honor this one too. I tapped the screen, and the room fell silent. Miles. Voice filled the air, sharp and irritated. Tessa, stop dragging me into your family's games. I'm not getting back with you. I don't care what your mother thinks. The words hit like a bomb. Judith's fork clattered against her plate. Grant's wine glass slipped from his fingers. And Tessa, her smirk vanished. Her mouth opened, then shut. I leaned back in my chair, folding the divorce papers in my lap, and offered them a small, tight smile. Care to explain? Silence. Nobody spoke. Because they all knew. I wasn't the downgrade they thought I was. I was the man who had just turned their entire little game upside down, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd won. Wiped his face, murmuring something I couldn't get. But I didn't care. My eyes focused on Tessa, waiting for her to say something, anything, that might make sense of this. She didn't. She simply sat there in silence, like a kid caught sneaking. Candy who knows the game's up. Marina shook her head, her voice shaking. I trusted you, Tessa. I thought we had something real. That stung me too in an odd way. I wasn't the only one she'd hurt. The apartment felt smaller now, the walls closing in with all their lies and secrets. I took my phone, slipping it back into my pocket, feeling the weight of what I had just done. This wasn't just about catching her, it was about showing them. I wasn't the pushover they thought I'd been. I'd been collecting proof for weeks, tiny things I'd observed that didn't add up, and now it was all out there. Tessa's sobbing didn't move me anymore. She'd caused this mess, and I was done trying to mend it for her. The air in Tessa's room was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I stood there, watching her cry into her hands, yet I didn't feel an ounce of pity. Not after that voicemail. Not after everything. Judith was pacing now, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her face twisted up like she couldn't determine who to blame. Marina was still angry, her arms crossed tight, and Grant looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Then Judith spun on me, her eyes wild. "This is your fault, Brandon," she shouted, pointing that bony finger again. "You pushed her into this. You never fit with us." I just stared at her, letting her words bounce off me. She was grasping at straws, and we all knew it. She turned